Hey everybody, how you doing? It's Matthew here with Rooted Group. Here talking on Rooted in Cannabis. For you guys who don't know me, my name is Matthew Ehorn. I do communications for Rooted. Super fun job. Get to talk to a lot of different people every day, different parts of the industry, people who aren't in the industry, and kind of just get their take on stuff. And then kind of share these stories with you guys and bring some hopefully helpful tips that you guys find beneficial for your organization. So today we have a really good topic. We're gonna talk about systems. So systems is something I think we're kind of a little over the top. Rooted is a little over the top when it comes to systems, especially in which the way that we expect members to operate as well as the way that we operate. And we do so for a lot of reasons, but those we kind of wanted to get into today. But mainly just talk about what a system is and kind of different stories along with good systems and bad systems, right? So what is a system? I don't know the exact definition. Scott, can you pull up the definition while I give my at least 2 cents as to what it is?
Yep.
So a system it's a collection of things, right? A collection of steps that you perform or this thing performs or does in order to then get the same outcome, right? To get a specific outcome. And typically the beautiful thing about a system is as long as those steps are followed, the same outcome will come about. Right? And so that's one of the reasons why it's so important. Can we get the exact definition?
Yeah, we got the definition here. It's a set of things working together as parts of a mechanism or network.
Cool. So close. I would just add in to get the same result.
Yeah.
Right? I would add that into Webster. He needs to fix that. But yeah, to get the same result, right? Because there's no point in having a system if you're not going after something. Right? You should know what you need to do and then figure out the system. And I think that's kind of a great segue right now in terms of knowing what the end result is first. So Rooted Group, we run the back end, right? So we do administrative support for cannabis retailers. For those who are unlicensed, to get them licensed, as well as people who are licensed to then just focus more on selling and not so much the back end operation, right? The stuff that really they don't know how to do. And so one of the things though, and talk about when mentioning like lead with the end in mind, right? Create the system with the end in mind is, so Rooted Group is statewide, right? We support retailers all across the state and a lot of different locations and stuff like that. But it wouldn't be possible without really strict systems, right? And even then, it's not like we follow these steps perfectly and not have issues, right? Issues come about all the time. But if we didn't, I couldn't imagine what it would be like. And so in leading with the end in mind, one example, for us, is we knew when Rooted first came about, this was about 2.5 years ago, in terms of like the back end membership support. It was a different kind of cannabis company before that. But one thing we knew right away is that we were going to be statewide, right? So we had to figure out how to support cannabis retailers that are in different areas of the state, right? That is not an easy thing to figure out. At all. So this is the reason why many cannabis companies only operate in a specific area, right? Let's just talk about delivery service. So we've made up about a quarter of all delivery services in the state of California, handling the back end and stuff like that. And it's so hard for a company to then, let's say, operate in Los Angeles, then move to the Inland Empire, then move to San Diego, then move to the Bay Area, stuff like that. It's very difficult because the thought of the end in mind is not there, right? Therefore, there's systems that they put together. If they have systems, do not support that. So by the time we went statewide, starting from the Bay, by the time we went statewide, it wasn't easy, but we were able to make that transition, where I think a lot of companies would not be able to, because they didn't then create their systems, if they have them, with the end in mind. So I think that's super duper important to think of when creating systems. Also, I don't think it's possible to have a successful company, right? I don't care what kind of company it is, without systems in place, right? And we mainly work on, for example, the delivery side of the retail. We do storefront as well, back-end support, but mainly just deliveries, the bulk of it, because they just seem to need the most help. So there's a lot of logistics involved, right, in that. And many people think that logistics is as simple as going from point A to point B, right? So if that's what kind of the system in which you have, right, set up says, then that's what it is, right? So now when all these issues arise and this happens and this other issue happens, there's nothing to then correct it, right? And now that becomes an even bigger issue and stuff like that. So I have a great example. By the way, I'm sitting here, guys, and I feel like I'm like the president of the United States or something like that. Like, it's the end of the table, there's stuff in front of me, it's kind of bizarre. But, so I got a really good story on bad systems, right? And how it affects the bottom line. Because I think a lot of people, at least in my experience, a lot of people in the cannabis industry, they don't really care how smooth they operate as long as they're making money at the end of the day, which they're not understanding that the two go hand in hand. But in fact, kind of when you put in systems, you kind of remove some of that potential money making to then make more in the future, but which I think is a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. But so there was this vendor that came. This vendor came to I was in Oakland for a week. Normally I go out there, 2 times a month, something like that, to go to that facility, just for a few days. But I was there for a week straight, and I was there while there was some packages being received, some orders getting received, and there was this one distributor brand. They self-distribute, which, by the way, I never advise that, right? So you think of, Coca-Cola. The reason why they do so good, it's because they've mastered distribution. Right? So they're able to pick up all these other than beverage companies and then just add it to their distribution line. So distribution is extremely complex. And if you're a brand, there's no way you're putting the correct amount of energy towards distribution, and because you're not willing to take it away from your brand, right? Because you need to continue to build up that brand. So any brands out there, if you're listening, I promise you need a distributor. Don't do it yourself, because you don't do a good job from firsthand. So one of this company, they're pretty big, they come to deliver, and the driver honestly was the coolest guy ever, right? He's super cool guy, and he came in, he dropped out. Well, first let me just take a step back. So in terms of systems, so we have a delivery SOP. So because we support so many retailers, it's very complex, and it needs to be very organized in how we receive, how we then transfer, how we do all these different things within the product to be within the law. And so we have a delivery SOP for each vendor, right? That when we place the order, we send them, it's an infographic, right? Can't make it any easier on them. We send them an infographic that tells them, in order to deliver, you need to follow these steps and go over this. In order to collect payment, you need to follow these steps and go through it. Stuff like that. And as long as those steps are followed, everything will be good for the vendor. And some vendors, mainly the ones that are distributors that are distributing the brands, they follow these steps, and it's super fast, super easy, never any issues, right? Then when you have typically the brands that distribute themselves, this is just a generalization, of course, but this is where it's most common. They don't follow these steps, and it's a complete nightmare on our side and on their side. And I only imagine that they have a very bad opinion now about that delivery or us placing orders with them, stuff like that. And And it's really just because they aren't following simple instructions, right? So this vendor then goes, I need to hurry up and get to the store. So the vendor then goes and shows up. First, they show up after receiving hours. So because there's so many things that go on in the facility, we only receive during certain time frames. They show up after the delivery hours, like by far, called, say, hey, we got it. And we said, we didn't even know you were coming, first of all. So you didn't schedule it when you're supposed to. And for two, nobody's then here to receive. So there's no receiver then here that's willing to take the time to do that. So the driver, which I'm telling you, the driver was great, by the way. He's really, really cool guy. Goes, reschedules for the next morning. I don't know if the dispatcher or him, there was some disconnect, but it comes back before receiving hours start, right? So got there after they ended, got there before they start, about an hour before they start, wanting to drop off the order, and was not able to, right? Because no, you gotta wait till the time, sorry. We have specific systems we need to follow internally. In order to do that, we can't then, accommodate somebody else really. It's very difficult to do that because then it sacrifices something else. And we're not willing to do that. So, shows up, has to wait about an hour, right? Comes in with all the paperwork, has the invoice, has the manifest, has the product, right? It's about $2,000 order. It's not too big of an order. And so start receiving the order. And I remember I was in the receiving lounge when this was all going on, and we're receiving the order, and the manifest and the invoice and the product that was delivered, none of which match. So our receiver's like, hey, you need to go and change this, and change that. All right, so I can't receive it. So all this needs to be done, fast. And he's like, okay, yeah, no problem. So goes in, calls staff, tells them, breaks down everything that's going on. They're now about to send some changes, right, to kind of get through it because it just nothing matched. So we're like, we can't accept it the way that it is. And so then while talking with the driver, I was talking with the driver for a little bit, and he said how he has 19 deliveries that day to make, right? And because they're a Southern California based company and they were delivering then in Northern California, so they load up as many deliveries as possible. Makes sense, but 19 is not possible, right? There's no way you can make 19. So them just pushing that and thinking they will, they're not going to. They're going to fall short, and it just looks bad, right? But so 19 deliveries, as he's saying this drop that he made to us should have only been 15 minutes, right? Should have only been 15 minutes, maybe even less. But there was this issue. The staff then didn't fix it all for about an hour, right? An hour and a half, something like that. So we're now 2.5 hours deep in a $2,000 order. He has 19 drops, so that's -1. So there's 18 more drops, but he's already over 2 hours into his shift, right? And so I remember talking with the staff there in Oakland afterwards, and just I thought it was a great learning experience to the fact that this driver came in, the driver did everything the driver was supposed to do, right? But the systems were so bad that now instead of taking 15 minutes, it took over 2 hours, right? Let's just say you miss out on 5 drops that day, right? This is why system's so important. You miss out on 5 drops that day, you now, let's just say each of them are $2,000. That's $10,000 in revenue that you just missed out on. Right, especially if you're in SoCal, you got to then bring that product right down and come back up at a later day. What it also does, what a lot of brands that distribute their own product don't realize, is that inventory turns, right? It turns. So the faster you get inventory, the faster you can sell it, the faster you can then reorder, right? So not only were you not able to make that $10,000, you don't know what that potentially costed you. Because if you have to now reschedule for the next week, so you already look bad because now you got to call each one of them and say, sorry, I can't make it, when they're already expecting you. Then you have to go in, you deliver it to them the next week. Maybe those brands would have sold that product and they would have then requested another order that following week. And maybe they just built a client base that wants that specific product within their shop, right? So just the overall cost and all that is just totally ridiculous in just not understanding how important systems are. It's just super important that like this brand right? That, in my opinion, I kind of summed it up in kind of using that as a learning experience to then just talk about the staff, about like, this is why we need to follow the processes and the systems that we put into place, right? Because when not, you have issues like this, to where you look very bad, right? You miss out on monies in the immediate and also future monies, right? By, for example, not turning that inventory over. And so I thought it was a great experience. Figured it'd be a great story to kind of share with everyone, because it kind of, we see it time and time again. This one was just a little bit more crazy to me because I heard about the number of deliveries that they had. So yeah, but with systems as well, I think that it's super important to understand that every organization, right? There is no one size fits all type of system. I think every single organization, and even before every single organization, I think an organization is simply just a group of people, right? With the same, the same desires, wants, typically thought patterns, stuff like that, right? You hire people kind of similar to what you want that culture of the organization to be and what the organization to be. So everyone's very, very similar. Therefore, the organization is just a bigger group of thoughts, right? Very similar thoughts. So every organization, right, I think should have different systems up. There is no one size fits all. So when, we work, once again, we do a lot of the back end for retailers, right? In getting them licensed, as well as people that are already licensed. And a lot of them, when we first started doing that, we implemented some of our own systems, right, into their business, and realized it just didn't work as well as it does for us, right? And there's a lot of factors as to why that is the case. But I think the most important factor is the fact that it's a different organization, right? So instead, we then said, hey, look, here's the basis of this system, and here's why this system is important. Let's now work together to figure out how it would work within your organization and what we then need to do to change or stuff like that. And so we've then found that it's a lot more beneficial, and there's a lot more than the staff is taking it on more, and the companies are kind of starting to really see the benefits of that. So that's kind of what I think in terms of.
Why do you think that there's not like a system to base it off of? Or is there a system?
Yeah, for sure, right? So there's great, general guidelines, right? Like for example, when opening up the retail shop, right? There's certain steps you should be taking to open. Yeah. Same thing with close, right? That's not really gonna change, right? But for example, let's just say, for example, receiving products, right? We value certain things more than maybe someone else. And someone else may value certain things more than us, right? And therefore, if that's not part of the organization, if that's not what's embedded in what they do every single day and how they speak, in the meetings that are held, what's mentioned, and stuff like that, then if you have to now add that to your system, it doesn't catch on. It's not sincere. It's almost like too corporate, to where like no one likes corporate businesses, right? But corporate businesses do very well. Why? It's because they have systems. You get what I'm saying? So they just have more cutthroat systems, more like, if you do this, that's a write-up. Like, it's not necessary. But just finding out what system works for each company, because each company has a culture, and each culture then values different things.
How long do you think it took for you to develop a system that works, and or are you still developing?
Oof, that's a really good question. I think you're constantly refining your systems, right? Because with a lot of systems, and this is a lot with technology as well, right? This is why tech companies take so long to get big, is that you don't know if there's a problem until there's a problem. You get what I'm saying? It's kind of like, is overall like a true statement. Of course, you plan for potential problems, right? And that's what you incorporate just automatically in your systems, and that's what you should incorporate. But as you go on, you start realizing different things, right? And as you do that, if you realize this thing and it's hurting you and you don't change your system, that's just beyond foolish, right? There'll just be continuous consequences.
Part of the system is changing this.
Part of the system is changing it. Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's good for staff morale as well, right? Like doing the same thing over and over and over and over again is very mundane and boring.
Yeah.
Right? And so you could start adding new ways to kind of make it fun as well, right? And that's part of it. Just something we do here now is that in meetings, there's only really a few people talking and like overall, and at least a majority of the talking, and like it's not as fun as when then everyone's involved, right? But it's hard to get everybody involved if it doesn't necessarily pertain to them specifically, though they should hear it. And so one of the things we implemented just as a system for conducting meetings, right? You go as finite as that, is that, hey, in this call, instead of, for example, the group leader or whatever mentioning, giving a game plan or an SOP or a presentation on different things, each staff now gives a presentation on a specific thing that they work on, right? For example, when you're talking about, we have a certain system in which you check an invoice with the manifest, right? There's a certain way to do it, which is the most efficient. And so doing that, and because there's a lot of then external consequences that we face if that's not then checked initially. So it's not just a simple change for us. Yeah. So, so one of the presentations, right? One of the receivers then did it on checking the invoice with the manifest and going through specific details, right? We always say, and rooted details matter, right? And so going through the specific details and different scenarios and different this, and like it made it so much more of an enjoyable meeting, rather than just going over the same mundane questions, the same answers. Very rarely is it a different answer. It's boring, and it's not very productive, to where you're better off just working and getting on the call. But this kind of does a lot of different things. It teaches everyone how to communicate properly. It teaches them how to present something. It teaches them, it helps them understand why they do certain things and why it's important. Because they have to now go through the details as to, well, if I didn't, this would happen, and stuff like that. So, that's just kind of a fairly new system that we've implemented just within meetings, for example. Yeah. So I think you're always changing them. But one of the interesting things is the timing of a system, right? Is when do you actually implement some kind of system, right? I think you always need to have something, a general one, right? Before you do anything. Because if you don't, then you're not gonna make it, right? You're gonna have too many issues. You're gonna be like that brand that dropped off the product that missed out on minimum $20,000, in my opinion, from just us. And if you had the problem with us, you have the problem with somebody else as well, right? Therefore, you probably only made 4 deliveries instead of 19. It's a very big difference. And so you need to have some kind of general plan and system for completing a task. But I think when then implementing it, it's unique to the organization, right? I think, for example, Rooted Group today compared to 2 years ago, for example, right, or a year and a half ago, it's 99% a different organization, because there's more systems in place, right? So, we've done some stuff. There was a fire at the first facility, burned everything down. We weren't really operating for about 2 months in fighting to get a new license at a different facility. And it was literally just a fight with the state, with the city. It was crazy. Because there's no system that the government has to handle that type of situation, right? So they're following their systems for a regular license applicant, right? But we have nothing to do with that. This is literally, we are an operating business that the facility burnt down, right? Some crackhead outside, and burnt down the entire block. And they didn't have a single thing for us to do, which I think it's fine, right? A lot of things you can't plan for until they happen. But then they never switched anything, right? I'm like, okay, yes, you could bypass XYZ because it takes too long for us to do it. We know that you already know to do it. We'll issue a license, you can continue to operate, and then check later. Stuff like that, right? That's what I think should have happened. But no, we had to go through each thing, and they kept going back on their word and all these different things. And so you think about like just that alone could have costed, it just in taxes alone would have had lots, millions. So you think you're just missing out on who knows what if we wouldn't have been so persistent fighting you for this stuff.
Oh yeah.
So, but I think there's different times in implementing new systems, right? Like I think, for example, the state should have implemented a new system after that happened.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not just gonna happen only one time.
Yeah.
But that's not how governments work.
Yeah.
So, but when that fire happened, right? And I bring it up mainly because that's where we became obsessed with systems and details, right? Because you realize something could be gone in a second, right? And the only thing that you could take with you is kind of the system in which you do stuff.
Yeah.
Your understanding of what it is, because you could then just duplicate it again.
Yeah.
Right? And so when that happened, we got together and we didn't have many SOPs, maybe like 3 or 4 just for like specific things to make sure they were getting done. But we then it was like 120 something SOPs. Literally every single thing, every task that we do has now a system in which it should be done, right? We then say, hey, the staff is free to you're not getting written up if you don't do it this way. But if you don't do it this way and there's a problem, we now have a problem. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because this should be done in this type of way. And we know if it gets done in this way, we won't have any issues. And that was really a big turning point for us. And that was almost a year after operating, right? To then dive into these systems where...
How long ago was that now?
That was September of 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
It
September.
doesn't feel that long ago, actually.
No, it really doesn't. It's kind of crazy. Time flies. But yeah, so but I think systems should be done kind of almost after the fact, in my opinion, because one thing I think a lot of people struggle with, just people in general, human beings, is we think everything needs to be perfect before we do something, right? The thing is, I think as the more stuff you do, you realize it's impossible to be perfect, even if you've been doing it for 10 years, right? So first things first, you just need to get it out. Whatever it is, I don't know what it is. You just gotta do it. Just do it. Don't be foolish. You should think things through, but don't necessarily worry about those systems, right? Then as you do it, then start figuring out, okay, now that we're doing it, what systems can we put in place to ensure this is run better, this is more efficient, the customers are happier, this and that.
Yeah, the idea of the facility burning down wasn't even in the forefront of your mind.
No.
Why would there be a system for that? You would never think that was going to happen until you experienced it. So, yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, it's kind of, it's interesting, but I think you implement a system when you're ready. That's what I think. Mm-hmm. And you're ready because you start having a lot of problems, right? So that brand in particular, I keep picking on them, but that brand in particular, if they don't think they need a system right now, they're not making it. It was so bad. And just thinking of everything that goes with it. But it's not even them. It's almost every single drop that we get from a brand, there's a problem that we need to fix. Unless it's literally a distributor. You know what I mean? A company that just specializes in dropping off product. Even then, some of them have really big issues. Some of them are extremely good. Mm-hmm. So it really just depends on where you're putting your energy and stuff like that. But I think if you're putting your energy towards systems, everything takes care of itself. Right? And so, yeah, but it needs to be unique to your organization to where you know what I mean? I guess, we operate out of the Bay largely. And you think of like Golden State Warriors, right? Like, but let's just talk basketball for a second. Golden State Warriors, they are an incredible organization from the beginning, from the first staff member all the way to from the top of the totem pole to the bottom, right? Mm-hmm. They do things a different way. It's very obvious when you just watch them play the game of basketball, right? But now if you were to put a different team, different set of players in that organization, I don't think it would work as good, right? So you're able to do that because you have Steph Curry, you have Klay Thompson shooting lights out of the ball, right? Therefore, it spreads the offense. Therefore, you're willing to be more risky. You're willing to jack up more shots. It's faster pace. You have a center that controls the ball. You know what I mean? It facilitates these different things to where that doesn't work with other organizations. So I want people to understand that, like, yes, you need systems, but you need your systems, not a system. It's a very big difference. So,
there's different systems for every company, but like not to say any one of them is better than the other or would fit the other company better.
No, it's 100% unique. So it's not as simple like, oh yeah, just do this and you're good.
Yeah.
Where I think there is a basis, right? If you don't turn the ball over and you get rebounds, like just mentioning back to basketball, right? Or if your paperwork doesn't match the product, right? And if you don't hit your ETAs, you're gonna have problems, right? That didn't just spiral. And that's the power of logistics. Everything needs to be perfect. And it's fine. But if it's not, then you don't even know that cascading effect that happens. So, yeah. So one way too, and how do you create systems, right? We talked a little bit about it needs to be unique to the organization. I think too, getting everyone's input within the organization before then that system's then created, right, is super valuable, because typically the person who's writing up the SOP, right, is not the one who does it every single day. It's not the way it works, right? So to get everyone's input and to have open dialogue and to go slowly and to add to it and to continuously have meetings about it and these different things, you kind of further solidify and refine that system to where, and everyone likes it because then, you know what I mean? They're having a lot of fun. So, in creating now the way in which the organization is run.
Yeah, I definitely think it's important to like get some feedback from that's why you see all these companies like and you fill out this, and if you have feedback or tips and suggestions or whatever, because like they're not the ones doing it.
No.
Yeah, if you're creating it, that's your job, is creating it, not like what's more comfortable for the actual person. So yeah, definitely super important to like get feedback from them. I agree. For sure.
So some tips to add in systems. Of course I'm biased here. I think you just give us a call. We'll help you out. but in actuality, it's not like we got the best systems in the world, right? We're trying to figure it out just as you are. But I think just that conscious, that curiosity in now figuring out how to make the system better and more efficient and stuff like that, I think is a big one. And I think there's kind of key areas to where you need the tips first, right? I think when it comes to finances, so accounting, right? And when it comes to any kind of logistics, right? Those two things need the most systems, right? Because a lot of other things, let's say on the customer service standpoint, right? There is certain things you can do, right? To be a more customer service driven company, certain policies you could have in place, like refund policies, different things like that, right? Sales and, different promotions, all these different things. But the real advantage in, for example, on a customer service standpoint is, and why I say that should be the last thing for kind of systems, is because you just need to hire better people, right? Or I guess that would be a system in of itself, right? Is hiring the right people. Because from a customer service standpoint, people don't buy from businesses, or they don't work with businesses. They work with people and they buy from people, right? So if you have good staff and you let them be themselves, they'll then drive that customer service kind of, philosophy, system, policy just naturally, because that's who they are. So I don't think that needs to be prioritized. I think it's more of the more kind of mundane stuff, if you will, to where it's like, how do you receive this? How do you package this? How do you pack this? How do you create this invoice? How do you then make this manifest? These different, ooh, almost knocked out, move my hands too much. But I think those are the main things that ultimately, if you work on those systems, you're automatically going to be more successful, guaranteed, because you'll have more at the bottom line. And from there, you could put it elsewhere, stuff like that. So, yeah, rather than spending money on mistakes, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so that's really the main thing, guys, I had written down for systems. I thought that was a great story, mentioning kind of how that brand had such a tough time dropping that off and how they just had good systems in place. I think they could have made another $20,000 that day, but they don't. So just make sure to focus more on your systems. If you guys need any help, make sure to give us a call. And yeah, guys, that's it. Thanks for listening. Appreciate you. We'll talk soon. Peace.